I'm sure you saw this review coming, The Odyssey, the most anticipated film of 2026, the return of Christopher Nolan, a movie with such high expectations it felt bound to almost fall short a little, delivers on every single level. It's incredible, amazing, spectacular. If I had a thesaurus in front of me, I could read 15 more adjectives. Now, if you haven't seen the film yet, rush right now to your nearest movie theater and watch it because this review does contain spoilers. And to briefly touch upon the movie theater going experience when you watch this film, it's unparalleled. Like my theater, and I think the same is true across almost every theater across the country, it was nearly 100% booked. You have the huge screen in front of you, you have the big sound speakers. An experience at home where you wait to rent it on video cannot compete. So make sure to go see it in theaters. Now, I reviewed this film as a 4.5 out of 5 stars, but I think on my second viewing, I could easily change that to a 5 out of 5 stars. And with a 3 hour long film like The Odyssey, I really want to break down my review point by point, beginning with the visuals. And the visuals are stunning. They feel like they deserve to be in a museum where, you know how when you're on Netflix and you're idle for a while so that the screen changes to see a picture of like a polar bear or a forest or outer space, like something from nature, those shots should be completely replaced with shots from the Odyssey. And Christopher Nolan, first and foremost, does an incredible job when it comes to both the lighting and the shadows. Where the shadows, when Odysseus returns home to Ithaca after 17 years, he's so good at using shadows to conceal his identity. And he uses shadows also to add the sense of mystery to certain characters like Agamemnon. And then with the lighting, the natural lighting feels so real where you see these candles, you see the fire. I honestly felt like I could feel the fire on my skin. Maybe that sounds pretentious, but the lighting is really, really good. And even the scene, like when you see the Grecian soldiers trapped in the Trojan horse together with not much lighting, you feel like you're with them. So he does a good job on that front. And also the shot selection is incredible, especially these extreme wide shots he takes, where, for example, he'll put the camera maybe 500, if not more yards away from the point of action, where many shots are just Odysseus' boat on the placid waters. And in the background, maybe we see the infinite sea, maybe we see a piece of land, but it just looks so beautiful. It's breathtaking. So the visuals are great. I would love to honestly, if I had to just watch this film without any sound, I could do it easily. The visuals are that good. Now, when we move on to the score, it was done by Ludwig Göransson, and it was also incredible. This is the same individual who did Sinners, who did the Oppenheimer. He has multiple Oscars, and he delivers again in The Odyssey in his second, I believe, film with Christopher Nolan. Great job. Two songs that I really want to point out that I enjoyed were firstly the sirens, where the sirens, it's almost like an impossible task he's given when you have the sirens with this huge mythological importance, and he's essentially supposed to create the sound that is the most beautiful and alluring thing you've ever heard in your entire life, because that's what the sirens are. So again, it's an impossible task, but he does his best. And I think his selection and his decisions were really good. That was one of my favorite pieces throughout the entire film. And then my second favorite song I really liked was, I think it's just called Troy. And it's what plays when you see the fall of Troy. And that was also a really great song. You feel the battle going on behind you. You feel just the pent up emotion and bloodthirstiness, if that makes sense. Maybe you can't feel that in music, but he does a really good job of capturing the emotions. So those two songs in particular, I wanted to point out. The only critique, and I don't know if this is his fault, I don't know if it's Nolan's fault or the sound mixing guy, but sometimes the music is so loud you can't hear anything. And this is obviously a problem because I'm supposed to be paying attention to characters, but it's almost impossible to do so when the music is 12. So that's the one critique when it comes to the music. And then with the casting, I think that this got a lot of discussions online. And I like the casting very much. To begin with the core characters, I thought Matt Damon did an incredible job. He really immersed himself in this role. He didn't feel like Matt Damon, that Boston guy that you maybe think of immediately in Good Will Hunting. He felt like Odysseus. Great job. Anne Hathaway as Penelope was amazing. And Telemachus, portrayed by Tom Holland, was also great. I have two standout performances. One was Robert Pattinson as Antinous. I feel like I've been seeing more of Robert Pattinson this year in a while with Die My Love. He was in the drama. He did an incredible job. He keeps the streak alive with amazing performances. So him as Antinous, who's the most despicable of all the suitors, he does a great job of capturing just his evilness, and he really makes me hate him. So Robert Pattinson, great job. And then the second character I really thought was very good was Hamish Patel as Eurylochus. He also, I didn't even know he was in the film. He does a great job. And again, all the casting was good. I only have two complaints, where one was John Barenthal as Menelaus. I really just could not see John Barenthal as that. I think of John Barenthal as like the Punisher or that guy in the Wolf of Wall Street. He doesn't change his voice at all. He just doesn't capture what I envision to be Menelaus, who's supposed to be the king of Sparta. He doesn't seem kingly. Instead, he just seems like a warrior, and there's a big difference that we have to realize. So I thought John Barenthal was a miscast, and as well with Elliot Page, I simply thought Elliot is just too small to portray a Grecian soldier. So those were the only complaints I had about the casting. But again, overall, really good. Uh, and then also now we can kind of talk about the scenes. And I'm not going to break down scene by scene. We'd be here forever discussing a 3 hour movie. So I just want to talk about things I liked with the decisions. First and foremost, like the book, it does a good job of going the direction it takes in terms of what comes first and what comes at the last, because it doesn't go in chronological order. We're not going to begin with the Trojan War. That wouldn't make sense. Instead, we begin with Telemachus and Penelope at Ithaca. We do this whole thing of world building where we see just the vile state that Ithaca has been brought to, with this house of suitors vying for Penelope's hands, treating servants poorly, treating the most loyal servants to Odysseus like Eumaeus poorly. So we see just what a state of disarray it's in. And we also see how badly Telemachus wants to make his father proud and make his mother proud. He wants to step up as a man. He's essentially a boy, and he understands that if he kind of just hides under his mother's skirts, the suitors are going to take over and lead to his death. So he has to step up. So we see this great coming of age story with him. And Penelope, we also see her just how much she loves Odysseus. And we kind of get back to the core text where we see kind of the tricks she's been playing, such as building a shroud for Laertes, which he slowly undoes every night, things like that. So starting off in Ithaca was a great choice, just like as it was in the text, because it makes us even more excited to see Odysseus. If we start with Odysseus, we're not going to be as interested to go back to Ithaca and hear about a character like Telemachus. This guy's not even the titular character. But the buildup of hearing so much about Odysseus's battles, it begins with a song by Travis Scott playing, the song for the man of twists and turns. So a great job the first, 45 minutes, hours. Then we go to Odysseus and we see him on the island with Calypso, and we get to see his perspective through flashbacks, which again is authentic to the original text. And some of these scenes were incredible, seeing just the different trials and tribulations he had to face. Two that I like to point out were the scene with Polyphemus, the Cyclops, and that was just great. There was this element of like horror in it that I was really not expecting. Very scary, but also really good and just exciting throughout the entire time, not knowing how they're going to escape, what's going to happen if you've never read it before. And even if you had, you're still on the edge of your seat. So that was a great scene I really liked. And the second one that's certainly notable and definitely innovative in the approach it takes is with Circe. And specifically, it's when you see the actual transformation from humans into pigs, where it's not simply the soldiers of Odysseus, they eat the stew and they turn and then cut and then turn to pigs. No, we actually see Circe going up to them, molding them into pigs. It was certainly very disturbing. But the fact that I'm talking about it and it's still in my mind, it leaves an impression. So that was certainly a memorable scene. What else did I like? And then also I can't keep on going scene by scene, but I love the siren scene I talked about. That scene where you see Odysseus yelling when he's tied to the mast of the ship, that really reminded me of the Matthew McConaughey famous meme where he's saying no, no from Interstellar. I honestly think that we could see that type of meme come out from this movie. So the sirens is great. And also just many scenes were great. Scylla, Charybdis, I could go on and on, but those are the ones that stood out to me so far. And then we progress where after getting out of Odysseus' recollections, he finally makes the decision after regaining his memory of what he lost in Ithaca to come back home, and Calypso helps him send him away. And the last hour, that whole thing it's the best part of the movie by far. And the movie was at a 10 before. I feel like the last hour where he finally returns to Ithaca, that's at a 15. It is so good. I think mainly because it's just dripped in this huge layer of dramatic irony where it's really there's a sense of anxiousness where we know as the audience that Odysseus has returned, but nobody else does. And that's what makes it so great. But we also know, oh man, he's going to get his revenge. He's going to kick ass. And we're just waiting for that moment because we've really wanted to see Antinous get his teeth knocked out. We want to see all these suitors dead. And we know Odysseus is going to deliver on that promise. And we're just waiting for it. So the last hour was great. And it also has this great scene where we're also waiting for the family reunion between Telemachus and Odysseus, where again, Odysseus hasn't seen his son since he was a babe, since he was like 2 or 3 years old at most. So that scene is also fraught with tension. And that was really good, where they reunite with Odysseus saving his life, from the men who were trying to attack Telemachus, their assassins. So that was great. So those are the scenes that I really liked. Again, I could talk about them in depth, but then this review is going to go on for a while, and you have better things to do. You again, you have to watch the Odyssey for a second time, so I'm not going to keep you here. Then with the themes, and I think that there were three big themes throughout it. The first one is Christopher Nolan certainly decided to make the Odyssey more of a love story than it initially was. And I have no problem with that. I actually like it because it adds this element of, love is what keeps us strong when we're going through the struggles of our lives, where he constantly, Odysseus, grasps on to essentially this like idol Penelope gave him to always remember home. And he never really forgets her until he's forced to by Calypso. But this idea that, his love is going to surmount any challenge faced by him, it's good. It's very compelling. Um, Maybe it sounds cliche, but I like this kind of added love element to it. Because yes, in the Odyssey, you feel that Odysseus does love Penelope, but also in the original text, Odysseus sleeps with Circe, he sleeps with Calypso. Whereas when it comes to the movie, we never see him being unfaithful to Penelope once because he truly, truly loves her. So there's this great love scene, our love theme throughout the film. Secondly, this is a new one that I don't really remember being in the text, which is this importance and emphasis on something called Zeus's law. Essentially, what that is a rule of hospitality where anybody who enters your home, you should treat with the utmost respect. You should treat them as essentially a family member because you never know if they're disguising themselves as a god. So even if they're a beggar, you should treat them with respect. You should open your doors for them, serve them food, good hospitality. And that ties in with this idea of Odysseus's grief because it makes Odysseus much more multidimensional than the original text was, mainly the fact that we actually see Odysseus grieve over his decision to think of the Trojan horse, which led to the slaughter of thousands of innocents and meant that it was a violation of Zeus's law, where he broke into the walls of Troy without being invited and he didn't repay his guests kindly. His men slaughtered thousands. They wreaked havoc on the city of Troy. There was a huge siege. It was ransacked. So this element where Odysseus feels a sense of grief is very, very compelling, and it's best manifest through Athena. So Athena is played by Zendaya. We actually don't see her that often, but what's interesting is Athena, as we know, she can take the form of anybody she wants. She can take the form of an animal, of a human. The form she chooses to take in Odysseus's mind is that of an innocent priestess of Troy that Odysseus saw beheaded, which really shows that it's almost his conscience that is giving him, that is leading him along the way. It's less of Athena's wisdom and more of his own self and grief speaking to him. So this theme of Odysseus violating Zeus's law, Odysseus feeling this huge sense of grief, it should be a moment of triumph and joy when he defeats the Trojans, is actually one of sadness, and it's one he really can't get over. So those were two new themes that were added that were not originally in the text. Now I kind of want to talk about the book versus movie. So the translation I read, this is the Robert Fagel's version of the Odyssey. I know that there's literally hundreds, and I believe, actually, I know for a fact that Christopher Nolan used a different translation, but I got to think that it's somewhat similar in telling the story. So the big difference is book versus movie. I'm usually a stickler when it comes to changing anything from the original text if it's huge. And a lot of big things were changed, but I would say net overall, the changes were great. The most basic changes that need to happen were simply cutting out some scenes because then the movie wouldn't be 3 hours, it'd be 4. So everything that it cut out and kept in, I have no problem with it. I think it chose the most important things to keep and it left up things that you can kind of do away with. So the process of like splicing what to choose from the text, really good job. But the changes, here are the ones I liked. I liked how we didn't have to see like this we didn't have to go to Mount Olympia and see this pantheon of gods. I remember, I think somebody like years ago was saying Robert Downey Jr. is cast to play Poseidon. And I thought if we keep on seeing the gods, like it's going to just look weird. It's not going to feel very human. So they did a good job of not showing, all the gods. The only god we see directly on screen is Athena. So that was a good change. Another good change is, and this may be controversial, I liked the ending. It gives a new twist to the film where Christopher Nolan, he ends it with the idea of Telemachus coming to be king of Ithaca, whereas Odysseus and Penelope, they sail off into the sunset. Whereas in actuality, or in the text, Odysseus and Penelope, they rule Ithaca together. Odysseus essentially is reinstalled into his seat. And I like this ending because one, it shows that Telemachus has finally grown to the man he always strove to be. He came of age. His Bildungsroman is over. And then I also like the fact that Odysseus and Penelope, it kind of continues this love theme with them where all they need is each other. The wealth doesn't matter. The kingdom doesn't matter. As long as they're with each other, they have their sense of paradise. So I actually like that change. Now, some of the changes I really did not like. The biggest one I didn't like was I wrote it down. These Antinous backstory. Again, Antinous is played by Robert Pattinson. He's the most vile of the suitors, and they add this weird backstory where they make it seem like where they make it a fact that he was chosen to go to the Trojan War. He selected a lot, but he essentially passed it on to like a poor farmer's boy, and because he was so cowardly, he got to stay back at home. And I get the purpose of this. It's to make us add more hatred to Antinous, add more fuel to the fire. But I just think it wasn't needed. And beyond that, maybe this is just a personal thing, but I was somewhat confused by it, where I really didn't understand the relationship between this Antinous character and the character played by Elliot Page. So that I didn't love. That was a weird change. And it honestly felt like it's not really a change in that it's an addition. Like I think changes are best when you kind of use the original text and maybe tweak it a little. But this is just a completely new thing that doesn't exist. And I didn't love that. Also, I didn't love the idea that the Trojan War wasn't really fought to save Helen, but instead, like Agamemnon wanted trading ports. I don't really understand the purpose of that. Like, why not just keep the motive of the Trojan War the same, which is that Helen was kidnapped, and then Menelaus recruits his brother and recruits all the Grecians to fight against the Trojans. That I think is much better, and it adds into the love theme. So that was one change I didn't like. Again, there were a lot of other smaller changes I can tell you, like the fact that Calypso actually doesn't feed him the lotus flower in the book, the fact that I don't know, Circe isn't like she doesn't turn her sister or brother into a crow. I forget which one, but those are very minor. So again, net changes I liked a lot. There's another thing I want to mention is I should have mentioned this. I like also the original theme it keeps. So I talked about the two themes it added, but it does a really good job of being honest to the original text of the core theme. And this spans throughout almost all of ancient Greece, ancient Grecian literature, and almost all of Greek mythology, which is the battle between the gods and man, where man is subject to the will of the gods. His destiny is fated and he can't fight it. And no matter how badly Odysseus wants to fight what has been dealt to his men, where the gods tell him, Tiresias, he's not a god, but he is a seer, he tells Odysseus, your men aren't going to make it. Odysseus refuses to believe that, but it comes to pass. He sees his men eating the cattle from the sun god, and he knows they're going to die. So no matter how much he wants to fight against the will of the gods, he understands that he's a subject to them. So I really like that they kept that tragic irony in it where, you know, destiny is set in stone. You can't change it. So I like that they kept that. Um, that's really everything I wanted to cover. It's a great movie. I'm so glad that I got to see it on opening day with my friends. Actually, it was a great experience. And again, if you haven't seen it, make sure to watch it. Until next time, keep the popcorn warm. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments and make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you.